Well, hello and welcome to the Pen to Publish podcast from the two Alexas. If you're penning and publishing or even just planning to pen and publish, you're in the right place. I'm Alexa Whitten, author, typesetter and independent publisher, and
I'm Alexa Tewkesbury, author, editor and proofreader. You can never have too many Alexas. We love getting feedback, so do please review and subscribe. And we also have a group full of like-minded writers, which you can join over on Facebook and get your writing results happening. It's called the Writers' Refinery, and the link will be in the show notes that accompany these podcasts. So let's get started.
Well, hello and welcome to Series 4 of the Pen to Publish podcast. When we set out to do this podcast, we had a very clear 4 series in our heads. Writing, editing, typesetting and publishing. But then as we were recording, we realized that we really couldn't contain everything into just 4 series. So we quickly discussed a 4th, or rather, I kind of strong-armed Alexa into a 4th. And we realized that also this extra series that we were going to do couldn't really come after the last one that we had planned out. So we've decided to make this now number 4. So we're actually going to have 5 series. We've even spoken about having 6 just to round it up to a nice even number. Alexa's shaking her head, but I'm sure we would be able to find, I think we talked about series 6 being a lot more interviews with people who have gone to publish their books. Because I think when you're talking to other people who've gone through the process, it's really valuable to learn their lessons and their journey. So I think that's what series 6 will be. We'll be inviting people who have written their book to come on and share their stories.
And we've worked with such a variety of authors as well. So they'll all be coming with different experience of different content. So that could be really interesting, actually.
Exactly. So this series, consider it like a bonus section of a DVD, if you can remember DVDs back in the day. But you're getting the bonus DVD before the end of the film. Consider it a lucky dip of series of Pen to Publish podcast. So today we're going to be talking about titles, straplines, blurbs and bios. And I added a bit about acknowledgements too at the end. Now, any keen listener will know that we talked briefly about these in the last series, episode 6, actually, but we didn't go into very much detail. So I thought we'd go a little bit deeper into what makes a good title, the importance of a clear strapline, and then the all-important blurb about the author and acknowledgements at the end. So I'm just going to go straight in and talk about business books. Alexa's going to be coming in, obviously, and talking about fiction because they're very, very different in their approach. Most business books tend to have catchy titles, either an alliteration, for instance, or something that is short and sweet. I mean, you're obviously going to get an exception to the rule and have an incredibly long title. Do you know, I don't think I've told you this, just as an aside. So I got I got a phone call from someone looking for an ISBN. And their title, they wanted to know what the maximum title could be for a book.
What number of words?
Yeah. I didn't know. Don't know what it is. So I was like, well, I don't know. I don't know if there is a maximum. This book's title was 52 pages long.
The title? Was it in Welsh? Because they have lots of letters in their words, don't they?
52 pages.
So did you say no?
That ain't a catchy title.
And what was the strapline?
Well, the strapline actually is the title, but they were trying to be clever. So after phoning up Nielsen's to find out, and Nielsen's are the ISBN agency for the UK, it's where I get my ISBNs from. After phoning them up, the guy didn't really believe me. He thought it was a hoax call. And I'm like, it's really not a hoax call. I'm finding out what the longest title is. Anyway, I sent him through the request, which was denied. And they basically came back and said, no, it has to be a maximum. And I can't remember the number. I think it's something like, characters actually is the maximum. Okay. And I think it worked out to be about 15 words, I think 20 words, something like that. Well, obviously 52 pages. Like how they were going to make that so what they did to make it as a cover, because obviously you can't have 52 pages just for a cover, they reduced the typeface down to like 0.5 of a point. So you couldn't read it.
Wow.
And then it just fitted on a page. But it just, I mean, I don't know what their objective was. But anyway.
How long was the book?
It was poems. It didn't go through, as you can imagine. So, yeah, catchy. You want catchy, not 52 pages long. If we go back to, and then what you want to do is you want to have cleverish title. And then what you do is you make sure that the strapline then does the heavy lifting, because you don't want the title of your book being so obscure that no one knows what it's talking about. So if you're going to have an obscure title, make sure that your strapline then really explains what the book is going to be about. For instance, if we go and use the example that we spoke about in episode 6, which was Michael Gerber's The E-Myth. The E-Myth, to me, what does the E-Myth mean? Doesn't really mean anything, because I didn't even know what the E stands for. It's the strapline then that explained what the book is about. And the strapline is why most small businesses don't work and what to do about it. Now, that strapline is very benefit orientated. So obviously it's a book about small businesses, why they don't work, and then how to fix that. So the strapline does the heavy lifting. Now, it still doesn't tell us what the E stands for, but the strapline is enough for us to know what the book is about. The back blurb then goes on to talk about what the book is in more detail, and that's where we find out that the E stands for entrepreneur. So it's very clever because it then leads the reader to find out more about the book by turning it over, reading the back blurb. So your title needs to be clever, but not too clever in terms of alienating your reader. And if you have a slightly vague one, then this is why your strap line must let us know what the book is about. And also think about this too. When the E-Myth came out, that was going to be sold in bookshops so that the reader could turn over the book and read the back. When people are mostly buying books now online, be it on your website or on Amazon, you don't have the opportunity of turning the book over and reading the back blurb. So remember that as well, because the strapline really needs to explain the benefit. So have a think of what your book does in terms of helping the reader's problem, and make sure your title and strapline shares that.
I once for a fiction book had to come up with a strapline. It was it was years ago, and been racking my brains trying to think of the title of the book. It was a murder mystery type crime, and the author wanted a strapline. And I remember the strapline I came up with, which was, "What's your blood worth?" And I was really pleased with it because I thought it was all quite a complicated story about, it was all science and research and developing some, I don't know if it was a vaccine or something or other, long before pandemic times. But I thought for fiction, that's the same. Although you're not necessarily looking for a benefit, but you're still looking for that bit of intrigue. You're looking for something in the strapline that's going to pull the reader in and think, oh, that's interesting. So yeah, even for fiction, you can use them quite effectively as well. But it's just coming up with the right thing. And it's hard to do that, I think. It's really hard. It's not something, unless something pops into your head that's exactly right, you can spend a long time tussling with it, I think, to get it right. Which brings us on to cover blurbs. So I'll talk a bit about cover blurbs for fiction. And first of all, in case you might think it's easy, writing a blurb for the back cover of your book isn't easy. It might not look like many words when you read what's on the back, and you might feel you don't need to spend long over it, but you really do, because it's a vital component of your finished product. And it's one of the things, possibly, in a bookshop situation where readers, but they want to buy something, but they don't quite know what they want, and they're picking up and reading what's on the back. So it's possibly the thing at that stage that can help sell the book. You might pick up a book based on, say, an author or a genre, but it's what the blurb needs to do is to entice prospective readers with the promise of something unputdownable. But you only have at the most 100 to 200 words to do that in. So it's a challenge. To try to explain the ingredients of a blurb that really hits the spot, I thought it might be helpful if I go through and analyse what I personally think is the perfect book blurb. And this one is actually only 86 words. So in 86 words, they've done it brilliantly. Now, this is the blurb for The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman, which you may have read. It's been
read the first one and the second one.
Yeah. Well, I haven't read the second one yet. I need to get on with it. But I love this book. If murder is your thing, I think this just draws you in perfectly. So I'm going to read it now. And honestly, a silly voice comes to mind when I read this. Because do you remember, back in it was probably the 1990s, early 2000s, maybe, film trailers in the cinema. They always had that voice, that big American deep voice. And you'd say, next summer, this summer or something, be prepared to take a ride or something like that.
Yeah.
And I feel like this blurb fits perfectly with that, because it starts with 4 unlikely friends, a shocking murder. Welcome to the Thursday Murder Club. It's just brilliant. That just opening, I think, just sucks you in immediately. And then it goes on to kind of explain, in a peaceful retirement village, 4 unlikely friends meet up once a week to investigate unsolved murders. But when a brutal killing takes place on their very doorstep, the Thursday Murder Club find themselves in the middle of their first live case. Elizabeth, Joyce, Ibrahim and Ron might be pushing 80, but they still have a few tricks up their sleeves. Can our unorthodox but brilliant gang catch the killer before it's too late? So let's just go through this. Now, the genre and what you're getting with this book is encapsulated perfectly here. It starts off with a short, sharp hook to draw you in, 4 unlikely friends, a shocking murder. Now, to me, that has the ooh factor. Then, welcome to the Thursday Murder Club. And that's another ooh. Ooh, what is this club? So just in those first few words, I want to know so much more. I want this book already. Then the scene is set and the characters get their first mention. So in a peaceful retirement village, 4 unlikely friends meet up once a week to investigate unsolved murders. Now here the blurb homes in on the quirkiness, so the originality of the book, the brilliant contrast of the peaceful retirement village with the unsolved murders. And I think that just by adding in that one word, unlikely, it creates a feeling of intrigue. I want to know who these people are. And then you get to the heart of the plot. But when a brutal killing takes place on their doorstep, the Thursday Murder Club find themselves in the middle of their first live case. And then there's the list of the characters, and you're going to go on this adventure with them. So you want to know who they are. So they're named in the blurb. And then you get the cliffhanger. Can our unorthodox but brilliant gang catch the killer before it's too late? So there's a time limit here, which means the stakes are high. And can they? Okay, so to summarize, what are the elements of this blurb? Number 1, the genre is established. Number 2, we move on to a really hooky hook. If nothing else, it makes you want to read to the end of the blurb. Then number 3, the scene is set and the characters and their relationships, so unlikely, are introduced. Number 4, the crux of the plot is revealed. Number 5, the problem or the conflict is laid out and the stakes are set. And in the case of the Thursday Murder Club, there's a time limit. Now, it's important to remember that your blurb isn't supposed to be a detailed plot summary. It's a teaser. So like the 90s film trailer, it's a teaser. It's you don't want to give anything away, but you do want to make the book irresistible. So how can you achieve a brilliant book blurb? Well, try to keep the basic structure I've talked about and keep it as brief and as pared down as possible while including those 5 elements. So this is something that will be scanned quickly by a potential reader in a library or in a bookshop rather than read thoroughly. So it needs to leap out and grab them from the very first line, which this one really does. Now, we've talked a lot in previous episodes about targeting your ideal reader, and it's just as important in the blurb. It needs to be written to attract the reader that the book is written for and to be full of the flavour and style of the story itself. I've picked a specific example of adult fiction, but the blurb for a children's book follows the same principles. You're out to entice the reader as succinctly and deliciously as possible. If you need a starting point for your blurb, sometimes it can work to include a quote from the book, so something significant that holds a question or suggests the mystery of the story. Now, I've been editing quite a few rhyming children's picture books lately, and several of them use a key verse from the rhymes. So just 4 short lines, and then underneath, this is just expanded on slightly to entice the reader even more. Now, if you're assuming adults will be buying this book for a child, it can let them know what their child is going to get out of sharing this book with them. So a learning point, perhaps, you can include that there.
Yeah, I think a good example of this is Catherine Green's book that's coming up, Have You Ever Wondered What It's Like? And her book, I think, really encapsulates that. So she's given a verse at the back, hasn't she? And then we delve in more about what the actual book is about. So I've actually got that here. Let me read it out. People might find this useful. So Catherine's book cover is a rather extraordinary book called Have You Ever Wondered What It's Like? And it's rhyming book about, have you ever wondered what it's like to be something? And she goes through various items, strange items, weird items, items that you wouldn't necessarily think of, which what makes this book really rather quite special. This is what the back blurb says. How far can your imagination take you is the opening heading. Then we've got line of one of her verses. Have you ever wondered what it's like to be bright ink, flowing gently from a pen with words to make us think? I wonder if we'd write a tale about an abandoned ship, or would we suffer with writer's block, give up and have a kip? I mean, it's brilliant. Could ink from a pen really write its own story? Oh, that's a good question, maybe. Could a shoe have feelings? Because she talks about a shoe. And could a crocodile brush its teeth? Good point. And then Alexa came up with a creative rhyming poem brought to life through a whimsical dreamscape to encourage abstract thinking, curiosity, and wonder within the reader. Now, if I'd seen this book when my son was at a reading age, I would have definitely have picked up this book. This is brilliant. Like, could crocodile brush its teeth? I don't know. It's something really good to think about.
Yeah.
So I think this is a perfect example of you're writing clearly for the person who's going to be buying the book, which is the adult, but there's enough whimsy in there to go, oh, this looks really good, and I'm going to pick it up.
And just using that quote, just using that one short verse on the back to give you a flavour of what's actually inside in the writing style. Exactly. That works really well as well. And I think it can work for adult fiction too. So just find a quote that packs a punch and helps you to set up the scene, introduce the characters, present the conflict, and ask a question, all of that. And then, you can expand on it just a little bit as well. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the best things you can do, and it's like this with writing in a genre, writing generally, one of the best things you can do when preparing to write your blurb is just to read the blurbs of as many books in your genre as you can. You need to absorb it and think about things like, if they work well, why do they work? What is it about them that has impact? Can you identify the elements we've been talking about in this episode and how they fit together to grab attention? And if you read and analyze, then you'll get the format firmly fixed in your head, and hopefully that will help you to reproduce it in your own book blurb. Okay, so those are some thoughts for writing blurbs for fiction, but what about your speciality, Alexa? I know that with business books, it's going to be a little bit different.
Well, obviously, this is also really important. As with like fiction, you want to tease the reader with what is inside the book without giving away all the juicy bits, because obviously you don't want to give everything away on the back cover so they don't end up going by the book. So the back blurb needs to be equally as clever, but in a slightly different way. I always like to have a heading and not a repeat of the title on the back of the book. It's amazing how many people just repeat the title on the back of their business book. I don't know why. It's almost like they want to remind the reader what the book's called, but why do that? You've already got that on the front. So something that is going to intrigue the reader. Now, it can be a reader quote, as in someone's already read the book and they found it really, really useful. So they decide this book answered all the questions I possibly had on the subject. Well, I mean, if a reader says that, then obviously this book's got to be good, right? Something that explains how the book solved the reader's issue, or it can be a thought-provoking question. However, if you do that, make sure you tell the reader that question will obviously be answered within the book too. And don't make it a closed question. So don't make it a question that can be answered with either a yes or a no. You want a question that can be expanded on. So I like to then have a few paragraphs explaining what the book is about, with some bullet points about what's inside the book or what the reader will learn. Again, you need to do this in a clever way so that you're not giving the answers out, but explaining that what you need is obviously inside your book. So for instance, on my book, Publish Your Way to More Clients. Now that's a fairly self-explanatory title, but my subtitle is How to Plan, Write and Publish Your Book so you are the one in the eyes of your potential customers. So this really explains everything about what the book is. And then my back heading is How to Plan and Write the Most Powerful Lead Magnet whilst promoting your expertise in the most effective way possible. I'd like to think that's going to get some curiosity and like, oh, this is something I want to know. Yeah. And then the bullet points that I talk about. So I have 2 paragraphs that explain about what the book's about. And then I have bullet points. And I start the bullet points with, in this book, you'll learn the 3 critical questions you must ask before you start writing. Ooh, what are those 3 questions? Do you notice I don't say the 3 questions which are, and then list them? The next bullet is the blueprint plan strategy, which once completed will make your book writing as easy as painting by numbers. Ooh, book that's easy as to write as painting by numbers. I need that. The secret to writing effective call to action so that the readers get into your sales funnel. Well, anyone that's writing a book about lead generations knows that language. And yeah, that's the one key issue that most people have when they're writing a book for lead generation, is how do I get them then on my list to, get them to buy more stuff? And this one is one of my favorites. The biggest mistake new authors make in cover design. And then why publishing only on Amazon could be the biggest mistake you make. Ooh.
There's lots of drama there, really.
Drama. Yeah, there's drama there. So, and that's the whole point, is I want to create something that they're like, oh, I really want to know what these are now, because I had only thought of publishing on Amazon. So what mistake could that cause? And I knew that was a controversial point, but I go to explain why only publishing on Amazon could be a mistake. So that's, I think, effective back blurb copywriting. And also, before we go on to the author bios, which I actually think are fairly easy to write, book blurb is, I think, an art of its own. And you actually have, I think there are book blurb people out there that do just that. Copywriters are very good at coming up with book blurb. So like Alexa once said right at the beginning, don't think this is something that you can just whip up in a couple of minutes. It's something that you need to really think about. Go and read other business books if you're writing a business book, or go and read other fiction books so you can get a sense of what we're looking for. And I think when you can use other examples that are successful and then use that as inspiration, you're going to come up with something that is equally as inspirational. So I think you're now going to be talking about author bios. Now, on business books, and I did it on mine, you can actually have a little author bio on a business book and include a little photograph at the back. Some people like to do this so that you get to know the author, only because business books can be quite dry. So I like to include a little photo of who the author is on the back, and then a little sort of truncated, almost like explaining your qualifications as to why you've been able to write the book in third person. So I like to do that on the back of business books. You don't really see it on fiction, and I wouldn't necessarily say do it on fiction, but on a business book you can. So I just think it's sometimes nice for the reader to know who's written the book.
I think with fiction books I've been reading recently, I'm noticing it's in the inside. It's in one of the inside pages at the front, and you just get a black and white photo, or maybe no photo, and then just some things about the author.
On a hardback, yeah, you do. On a dust jacket, don't you? You get that.
Yeah, and yeah, just a few pages in as well. There's one I'm reading at the moment that's got it. But anyway, so just a few key things to remember when you are writing your author bio. Always write in the third person. You don't ever use I. You're writing it as if you're writing about someone else. So don't use I. Keep it brief, 100 to 200 words. The aim is to provide a snapshot of who you are, not a great long description of who you are. It doesn't need to include everything you've done. Just pick the highlights that are relevant to your book, and you can include other book titles if you've written more than one. Mention any other work you do, maybe that's relevant to or has sprung out of your writing. I think sometimes non-fiction teachers might write something and they'll draw on their teaching experience, and so they'll mention perhaps what their teaching experience is in. And then maybe a few personal details, so your family, where you live, things that you like to do, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, we talked about the ingredients of a book, and I think we mentioned the fact that usually about the author tends to come right at the very back. So many business books start with them, and I always think that's a mistake, because when someone reads a book they don't care about the author at this stage because they're buying a book to help them, not really wanting to know about who's written it. So I always encourage the about the author to go at the back of the book. Most fiction books have about the author at the back of the book as well, unless it's a very, very famous author. But I mean, even Lee Child has his stuff about him at the back. So don't start your business book with who you are, because we don't care at this stage. We care once we've read the book. Absolutely. We want to know who you are. But you don't need to have it all about you right at the beginning. I find it as a bit of a turn off, because it's like, this isn't about you. I've picked up this book because I want to help me. And also, yeah, this isn't your Oscar speech. I had one client, I think, that wrote 3 pages about himself. And it was just so long. And I mean, he even likened it to the fact that it was his Oscar speech. And he did go on and on and on and on. Anyway, at this stage, the book writing process had gone on for so long, I wasn't going to argue. He was the client, so I let him ramble on for 3-4 pages. But I honestly, people are probably going to be captivated for about a page, maybe 2. And then I like to add some personal details. I know you've said a few personal details are nice. Some, what you get up to in your spare time, what are your hobbies, where do you live, who do you live with, what do you do when you're not writing, or whatever it is. I think it just helps you give an insight to the author, which I really, really like. Now, acknowledgements. I think people really overlook acknowledgements in terms of a treasure trove of where you can get added information. And I think this is the perfect place that you can thank those people, obviously, that have helped you along the way. And I always read the acknowledgements whenever I'm reading a book, be it fiction, be it non-fiction, because it's a real insight as to who they value within their sphere. And what's always interesting, if you notice, the majority of authors give thanks and give the most thanks to their editors, which goes to show that all traditionally published books go through the editing process. In fact, if you look at the majority of fiction, the first 5 paragraphs are usually talking about the editor and how they've helped the author with their scribblings and the backwards and forwards. So if that isn't an insight and a reminder that you need to get an editor on board, I don't know what is. I mean, do you read the acknowledgements, Alexa?
Well, I didn't. I never used to, because I would just think, wow, I got to the end of another book. And I didn't. But I don't know, maybe a couple of years or so ago, I was listening online to an author talking, and she mentioned the acknowledgements, and she said just what you've said. She said, I think it's fascinating to read the acknowledgements and see all the people who've been involved in bringing this book together. So ever since then, I have started to read them. And yeah, you're right, the editors, they always receive a lot of thanks. I mean, going back to Joseph Milson, who we had as a guest for series 2, I think his acknowledgements were hilarious, if I remember rightly. I mean, you can have some fun with them. It doesn't have to be all formal. I think his acknowledgements were very amusing, and he had quite a few people to thank. If you haven't read Joseph Milson's book, do. It's really good. It's such a good book. Work and Other 4-Letter Words. It's the memoir of his first 10 years as an actor, and it's so engaging. It's terrifying what actors have to go through to try and keep in work, but just brilliant. And it's so humorous and it's so honest and down to earth. Yeah. I mean, I'm not a great one for autobiographies. That's not usually my genre. But obviously, because we interviewed him, I was intrigued to learn more about his work. And actually, I was hooked from kind of page 1. I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And I passed it on to my now fiance. Yes, I know. I got engaged just recently. I passed it on to my fiance, who doesn't really know Joseph Milson. He only knows him through the Bond movie that he was in, Casino Royale, right at the very beginning. And actually, Paul really enjoyed it. And he didn't really even know him per se. I mean, obviously, he's heard the episode, so he kind of knew him from that. But I just think acknowledgements is a really cool insight into the writer's life. So never, ever overlook those. If you've overlooked them before, start reading them, because they are, I think, a treasure trove of information. Definitely. So that's it for straplines, titles, blurb, about the author, and acknowledgements.
I mean, short and sweet. We're getting the hang of this now, Alexa. No waffling, straight to the point. Join us next week when we're going to be talking about heading hierarchies, how to sort them out. And if you don't know what I'm talking about if you don't know what I mean by heading hierarchies, I will let you know. Call to actions, why all books need them, even fiction books. Ooh, what could that mean? And the ISBN box that goes on the cover. Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about next week. So from now, it's a goodbye from me.
And a goodbye from me. Thanks for listening.
Bye.